Welcome to A Magical Life, Health, Wealth and Weight Loss. I'm your host, Magic Barclay, lead practitioner at Holistic Natural Health Australia and #1 best-selling author. In this podcast, I aim to give you practical tips on how to accelerate and sustain your health, increase your financial, spiritual and emotional wealth, and to look at something that haunts many of us needlessly, weight loss. In some episodes, I'll have guests available to give you even more tips, but in others, the floor is yours. Drop us a line at A Magical Life Podcast on Facebook and let me know what you would like to know more about. Now, sit back and enjoy, because it is time for you to create and truly discover a magical life. Welcome back to A Magical Life. I'm your host, Magic Barclay, and I'm again joined today by Tom Basey. Now, Tom, we mentioned in episode 119 quite a few things that can affect health insurance. And we kind of wrapped up the episode you were discussing about medicines. Now, some medicines you mentioned are covered, some are not, some are on the schedule, some are not. When the listeners are taking medications, let me just talk from an Australian perspective here first.
Okay.
So the listener goes to their GP, their general practitioner, and they might get prescribed, let's say, a statin, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Here we very rarely see the same GP for our lifetime. Like, you go to a clinic and you'll get one of 30 doctors that are there. So you might get prescribed a statin.
Mm-hmm.
Doctors here do not look at what you are already on before they do another prescription. So people can be on a collection of statins here, up to 5, all doing the same thing, and obviously also all having pretty nasty side effects. And can that kind of thing affect their health insurance?
You know, that's an interesting scenario. I would offer a couple of remarks about that. Number one, certainly the quality of care can vary some, but I would say that sounds like an outlier scenario to me. As a general rule, you do not get subscribed more than one statin type drug. And I would venture to say, if nothing else, it's kind of example. There are pros and cons, everything. That may be one of the good things from our expensive insurance scenarios that I think they watch that. Now, I don't think they would let that happen. So one, I don't think doctors as a general rule, I think they will look, in fact, that's a standard question is, are you on any other medication? So I don't think, one, it would happen. And then two, even if somehow it did, the insurance would catch that. So I think as a general rule, that won't happen. There's 2 checks and balances that I think will limit that doctors automatically ask, are you on any other prescriptions? And then also there's a significant effort in the US to have medical records that are basically electronic that follow you around. We don't have it completely resolved yet, but there's a good effort. For example, sometimes potentially if you'll stay in one network, and I mean electronic network, where the hospital and different care providers potentially, they know. And so, what's very annoying, and I suspect everybody has either experiences or seen it, you go to a hospital or you go to care thing and 2 or 3 people come and ask you the same set of questions. You're like, why do I have kids? And so we've actually made some progress in the use, I think. So I think medical records are a little bit better. So for those reasons, I don't think that would happen. Now, having said that, statins are a very common drug. It's probably the most common thing that I put in. There are different variations and flavors of it. But what I offer is, the good news is they don't cost very much at all. Depending on which plan you're on, typically that's going to cost $0 or single-digit dollars.
And in addition to that comment, here in Australia, folks, if your doctor doesn't ask you what you're on, you need to tell them. There is no point in expecting them to get their crystal ball out. They don't have time. They often, I'm not going to say don't care. Actually, I am. They don't care because they don't have time. They have to see X amount of patients in every 60 minutes of their day to get paid by Medicare here in Australia. And unless you are willing to come up with the information, they're not going to ask you most of the time. So you really need to take charge here and say, well, I'm on this and I'm on this. Now go. And let them take up that point in the conversation. This is your health. This is about you. You need to be proactive. Now, Tom, in the last episode, you mentioned COVID, pandemic, all that stuff going on at the moment in the world. And we know that, there's some big stuff happening with medications, no matter what you believe, whether you believe it's a trial or you believe it's a savior. The fact is there's no long-term data yet with what's happening. So how does that potentially impact people's insurance?
Wow. I don't have a great answer for you on how it's going to affect insurance. But what I would make a couple of remarks for you. One thing, I had the opportunity to work in medical device for 7 years. And so I have a lot of exposure to, example, even testing automation. And I've even traveled to other countries associated and work with equipment to test results. And so what I would offer is I have confidence in the overall approach of what we're doing here. And so if sometimes we've done things in a hurry because it's urgent, but what I would offer the listeners is, as somebody who's worked in that industry, I hate to say this, or don't like the FDA, but my point is the FDA is a gatekeeper. Their whole mission in life is to make certain that companies don't release things prematurely. Now, because of the hurriedness of the nature, I think that the U.S. government was telling our FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, to work with the providers, but there is rigor. So to get anything approved, you got to write up elaborate test plans and run some results. So I will say that I feel comfortable with the methodology overall. I haven't seen the data, no, but I would just kind of offer that the good news is between the companies and the overseeing agencies, I think they have reasonable approach. And then the one other thing I wanted to say before we got away from this, your previous remark, I have a friend, her name is Deidre Kindred, and she's basically a health advocate, and she's a proponent. She perhaps even puts on a whole, I think, workshop that someone should have basically like a health binder. So it has, like I mentioned that thing, how I help someone generate the medication list. I don't know what all she puts in there, probably your medical history, whatever it is. But my point is, I think that's a good thing. So my recommendation to you and your listeners is consider developing a personal health binder. What if you're incapacitated? Your family members can get a hold of that then. So I think I don't know a lot about it, but it brought it to mind when you said that. So I wanted to share that with you.
I think that's a fabulous idea. And you're right. What if you can't answer the questions one day and your family have to? So definitely that health binder, I think that's absolutely fantastic. And here in Australia, we're seeing some insurance companies saying if you don't get this many hours exercise a week, or if you don't eat this many vegetables a week, like they're asking questions now. And they're starting to base their decisions on whether they cover you or to what extent they cover you on your answers.
Mm.
How can we help the listeners to get the most out of their insurance? I know we've kind of discussed water and food and exercise, but what are some key steps from an insurance point of view that they can take to get the most out of what they're paying?
You're exceeding my expertise there. Based on your remarks, it kind of sounds like the opposite of what I'm accustomed to. That is, I think there's what we'll call standard rates versus preferred rates. And so I think that maybe insurance companies in the US are largely going to charge a standard rate that is assuming you're not doing either eating certain healthy things or getting adequate exercise. And then they ask you about it and then they will give you discounts, incentivize you. But I would offer that independent of the cost of your health, I think that everybody ought to try something. And what I mean is own your health to the extent that you can without knowledge. I mean, I'm arguing I'm making the efforts, but I don't have all the expertise, but I think everybody needs to own their health. So think about your health, make a conscious effort to make decisions about what you're going to do and what you're going to consume and what you're going to expose your body to. But consult with experts where you don't have that expertise. Start with your general practitioner, find them, and then seek out other. They don't know everything either, right? They refer out to specialists. So seek out other folks. I like personal trainers too. So be it your GP, personal trainer. And candidly, we're on a podcast right now. I've had to make a sea change. I like to read and I like to investigate. Information is growing exponentially. You got to listen to podcasts. I listen to podcasts now, and I watch videos on YouTube. Seek out information and check your sources. Right, do multiple sources. But I would ask everybody to own your own health. Recognize and commit that you want to live healthier, and then figure out what you can do. My struggles as diet is I don't live by myself, and so it'd be one thing to say I'm gonna eat exactly this. Well, unless I'm cooking it, or if I'm going to cook it every day, we kind of cook by committee at my house. It's a challenge to even control that. But so pick your battles, figure out which ones you can do. What I do is I own the smoothie in the morning. So I make the smoothie every morning, and I put spinach in it, banana, some other frozen food, some kind of non-dairy milk like a cashew or rice base or something like that. And then I'll put in some cinnamon in there, and I will put in some turmeric. I put that in there. And then actually, I don't put any sugar in it. I was putting honey for a while, and then we've kind of moved away from that. I'd like to put the honey back in it, but that's my smoothie. There's my free smoothie mix for your listeners. I like that, and I do that every day.
Some great tips there and a great smoothie recipe. Tom, I think we've pretty much covered anything the listeners need to know. Is there anything else that you think they need to know about their life, their health insurance?
Yeah, there's a lot, but we'd have to do a whole nother episode on that. Let's see. You broached the topic last time. I do think financial literacy is important. So you don't want to spend yourself out of. I think there can be an extreme where you spend more than you can afford to spend. So I would endorse financial literacy, and then I would endorse social/spiritual health. You need that as well. So we've been concentrating on our physical health, and it's very important. But I would say do not neglect your financial health and your social/spiritual wealth. But when those three, I think when you work those together, I think that's a winning combination. That's what I'd offer you.
Thank you. Now, listeners, you can find Tom on YouTube at Basey Insurance, on LinkedIn and Facebook at Basey Insurance, and definitely reach out to Tom if you have some questions about your medications, about the cost of everything. With that, reach out, jump onto his YouTube, have a look at what Tom has to offer you. Tom, thank you again for your time today.
Very good. It's been a pleasure. I'm grateful for you having me on.
Absolute pleasure. Listeners, coming up in episode 121, we have Lisa Miron talking about family constellations. Now, I'll let you ponder what that may be, but we'll find out very shortly. Listeners, again, thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it. Go forth and create your magical life. Thanks for listening today. Please subscribe to hear future episodes, leave a review, and share this podcast. You can follow us on Facebook at A Magical Life Podcast or at Holistic Natural Health Australia. That's holistic with a W. You can find us on Instagram at Holistic Natural Health or at www.holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. That's where you'll access all sorts of articles, freebies, and more.